Charles, aka Modita Heart. I'm writing this video letter to you at the beginning of March 2022. I hope this finds you well. And if you'll notice, I'm mixing up the letter format so it's not just like all text, and doing this video format combined with a slideshow presentation. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. It's early March 2022, and thoughts recently in just my headspace and in the world headspace seem to be, or at least in the US headspace, have been dominated by these two flags, that of Ukraine and that of trans pride. And in short, the history of Ukraine is rich and complex, with people inhabiting Ukraine since 32,000 BC. And just this whole situation brings up questions as to what is Ukraine, what is Russia, and what is a nation state. And also, more importantly, to what about the violence and suffering happening. It begs many questions such as, what does it even mean to have wars in the modern era? Why do things ever reach this point? And who really has anything to gain from war to begin with, ever? And why does that happen? And then, of course, the situation with trans rights in America is devastating, because even as things go on in the world, America is still figuring its shit out. And yeah, a lot of people have to suffer for it. And in addition to all these things, I also face the stress of internalizing progressive takes in response to all these things happening, that there's criticism to be had for imperialism in all forms, and dealing with the complexity that there's monsters that aren't just across from us as enemies, but also not so different from us and maybe alongside us or within us even. So that's tough to hear, and that's a lot to take in. And when we're in this environment, if you're anything like me, one problem you'll face is that you'll endlessly gorge on all this discouraging, stressful, and sometimes conflicting information from all different angles, and then when you talk to people, you'll end up spewing it out to friends and loved ones without saying or doing much that is really meaningful, and just kind of just endlessly spewing out, regurgitating like endless doomer memes and so on until infinity, and maybe it doesn't even look like a fun rainbow. So what's my hot take? What can I actually add to this conversation that isn't useless, that's just adding to the noise, and maybe actually giving something that might actually be helpful instead of just discouraging and making things even more chaotic and noisy? Is there something to parse from this beyond war equals bad, the internet is bad and makes me feel bad, and then people are bad and make me feel bad? What is the problem for me to talk about? What is the problem to focus on for me in this conversation? And when I think about that, I have to come at it from my own perspective. And I always consider, I don't know, in recent times I should say, I've started to consider my perspective as that of being informed about mental health and technology. And when I consider those things, I always consider maybe a little bit of frustration around technology and how we handle it mental health wise. But also I might have some insight, so I'll try to share some of that here. So maybe the big word I would consider this whole doom scrolling problem is in a wider picture of the attention economy, which is a term that has existed for a while, since like the late 90s. Here's a quote from psychologist and economist Herbert A. Simon in the work Designing Organizations for an Information-Rich World. He says, quote, "In an information-rich world, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention and a need to allocate that attention efficiently among the overabundance of information sources that might consume it. In short, there's too much info, too little attention to consume it, and too little to go around. So how do we spend it efficiently?" And yeah, if there's anything to take away from social media, if you can't tell from your own observations and what other people are saying now, is that the things that get our attention the most on the internet are often things that troll us, aggravate us, play to our deepest anxieties and insecurities, They often don't have to be true, and even might make us behave in negative ways towards strangers or even people we care about. Social media has an infinite feed. If we consume endlessly, then our attentions are essentially monopolized at the cost of all these other things which need attending in our lives. And that's great for social media companies and business there, and shareholders and investors and whatnot, but might not actually be good for society as a whole. So yeah, how can we address that, and what are the mechanisms that are going on there? So let's talk a little bit about the mechanisms going on there mental health wise first. So one of the fields that I've learned about is called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's one modality for therapy, and they have this set of descriptors for ways of unhealthy thinking called cognitive distortions. And each of these are worthy of a video on their own, but let's just focus on 3 of them for now. The 3 main ones I want to focus on are catastrophization, that's really hard to say, jumping to conclusions, and emotional reasoning. So catastrophization is kind of what it sounds like. It's blowing something negative out of proportion and jumping to the most catastrophic conclusion as a result. So all we do is focus on the potential negative outcome, and we can't even think of any other possibility. Jumping to conclusions is taking us from some kind of knowledge or assumption that we do have, that we know, and maybe leading us to another assumption that we might not have a clear indication of, or something that's more assumed, and usually that's negative, and then it leads us down another rabbit hole of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And emotional reasoning is when we assume something to be true because we feel them to be true, not necessarily because of evidence, but because of our emotions, which are usually negative. So when you start with, and that's again catastrophization, jumping to conclusions, and emotional reasoning. So what happens when you combine these 3? Well, first, if you're already in an activated state, if you're in a fight or flight or freeze state, you start reasoning emotionally. You start making logical judgments based on your negatively compromised state, and then you start jumping to conclusions and making flawed judgments and assumptions. Then you start imagining even more terrible scenarios and imagining even more worst case scenarios, and getting even more paralyzed and frozen and terrified, and it leads to even more escalated emotions and jumping to conclusions and more imagining bad scenarios, and you can imagine how it can quickly spiral out of control until you're certain the world is going to end. So yeah, don't do that. Try to catch yourself when you're doing that, and try to catch yourself early in that process, and don't make those logical leaps. So usually when you're focusing on the physical health, you want to help address the physical health first. So yeah, you don't want to keep doom scrolling. So yeah, my conclusion from all this is folks should be able to parse this information and attention economy better now. If all you do is doom scroll, the only thing you'll accomplish is ruining your mood, catastrophizing, jumping to conclusions, and you won't even end up helping those in need, including yourself and other people you care about and other people involved in these situations to begin with. It's not even getting you anywhere you need to be. So yeah, that's my Lisa Simpson presentation meme conclusion, maybe. And if you want to summarize it, endless doom scrolling is bad, and we should address that somehow. So how do we address that? And just to note, this is not a prescription for you in particular. This is just estimations based on my personal experiences with mental wellness and technology. This is not something that's tailored towards your experiences, art, or anyone else listening to this, because I don't know exactly what you're going through. This is more based around my own experiences, and I can try to speak to those, and if anybody finds that this resonates with them, they can try to apply it to themselves as they see fit. So where do you start? If you're already in an emotionally elevated state, escalated state, you got to calm down the body first. And if you're really compromised, maybe you need to do some deep breathing, some deep meditation, deep relaxing. You just need to address that in some way. And so you can do some deep breathing exercises. The 4-7-8 method as pictured here. There'll be a video at the end of this to look at as well. You can also read a book or listen to relaxing music to calm down. Or you can also go for a walk if you need to do something a little more active to work out the energy or some kind. Or you might drink some tea, which also has been proven to be relaxing as well. Just sometimes getting a nice hot pot of tea for me, honey, lemon, ginger tea for me. Just like the warm water and the fun flavors and calming flavors and just relaxing on the couch can be nice. And yeah, it also helps to do these things socially in a social context, depending on the person, of course, and the mood they're in as well. So yeah, try to address the body in any different number of methods based on what you need at a given moment, depending on how escalated you are. And yeah, and if you do it with other people, all the better, because health exists in a social context, as I like to think about it. Even with the previous slides on walks and tea, you can have them with friends and family. And also your engagement with these topics can exist in connection with others in your circle, in your circles, and having those connections can help you share resources with each other, help you empathize with each other, and yeah, and it's also nice to have some kind of excuse for a gathering when maybe you're not in like the most escalated state or something like that. Or if you are, maybe a phone call with a friend or hanging out with a friend in person might help. Yeah, and yeah, that is something that I want to just bring to the fore, because mental health is often not considered in a social context. It's often in a Western context considered on a very individualized basis, where you have to deal with it on your own, and you have to deal with it on your own at your job and with your local family, your nuclear family unit, and not in a community context. And yeah, so yeah, I just want to kind of unpack. That's worthy of unpacking on its own as well. And we'll continue that conversation as we continue with these letters moving forward. Yeah. Also, if you want to stay informed, which, you know, we still probably do want to stay informed of these things, if not on social media, consider alternative media to social media, such as radio or TV or even the newspaper. Although be careful that, you know, you might feel like newspapers can be a little slow. Yeah, what I've been doing is listening to NPR and the local radio for about an hour a day, while like making tea in the morning or something like that, making a snack, getting my fill of a bit of news, also making some eggs for breakfast for the family, feeling like I'm adding to the family's, I don't know, share of their fill for breakfast that day, and also feeling like I'm making a tangible change in my immediate environment. And yeah, I get to do that while listening to the dulcet tones of the relaxing newscasters of NPR, and get to hear it in a broader context than just 15-second videos or 140 character snippets. And that's been a really great alternative for me to do that all at the same time. So yeah. Yeah, as brought up in our chat at the Alt Salt gathering, we do have a limited time on Earth, not to, you know, stress people out, but yeah, we can be lucky to reach 80 years, and that might only be 4,000 weeks. Maybe I'm dropping some bombshells right here by saying that, but yeah, the point is that we need to spend that time happily, healthily, and meaningfully. Yeah, even if we don't realize how finite that is. So yeah, we have a limited amount of time for a limited number of choices, and within that time, a limited amount of attention. And how we choose to spend that time and attention is going to define how we lived our lives. So yeah, ideally when you're pulled away from social media, you have enough attention freed up to focus on meaningful action, and you can enact some of this change in your immediate surroundings and the people around you. As a wise man once told me, you can't boil the ocean, but you can boil a pot of water. And sometimes that pot of water you're boiling is for noodles for breakfast or something like that, as it is in real life sometimes for me. But also, to build on that metaphor, if you keep dumping water out of your pot, then it'll get lost in the ocean, and then you don't even have water to make your noodles, you don't have water to focus on helping people, you don't have water to focus on being able to actually help yourself at a certain point. You need to be able to retain that water and boil that limited amount of water you have, because we only have a finite amount of water in a given day, in a given week, in a given year, in a given decade, and stuff like that. So yeah, retain as much of those resources as you can by limiting your consumption of social media and doom scrolling. Wow. Yeah, I kind of didn't even phrase that in my notes, but yeah, that actually is very true. But anyway, maybe if we do that enough, we can all reach the point where we can internalize messages like the following from Mr. Rogers. Hopefully we're able to free up enough of these resources that we're able to actually have meaningful thoughts and meaningful feelings and meaningful actions in our lives. And maybe we'll internalize messages like the following. When I say it's you I like, I'm talking about that part of you that knows that life is far more than anything you can ever see or hear or touch. Anything you can ever see, far more than anything you can ever see or hear or touch. That deep part of you that allows you to stand for those without which humankind cannot survive. Love that conquers hate, peace that rises triumphant over war, and justice that proves more powerful than greed. Yeah, Mr. Rogers says you make each day a special day by just your being you, but he also says stuff like this too. And yeah, you can also internalize more complex messages like that of Hayao Miyazaki, who notably did not attend the Academy Awards in 2003, despite his Oscar win for making the animated classic Spirited Away, because of the deeply sad events taking place in the world. And he was citing the U.S.'s involvement in the Iraq War at the time, allegedly, or presumably. And his stances seem to be summarized by the following quote: "The concept of portraying evil and then destroying it, I know this is considered mainstream, but I think it is rotten." I said that weird. "The concept of portraying evil and then destroying it, I know this is considered mainstream, but I think it is rotten. This idea that whenever something evil happens, someone particular can be blamed and punished for it in life and in politics is hopeless." Yeah, that's speaking to a deeper truth that is really hard to grasp sometimes, but I do aspire to try to ascertain the meaning of quotes like that in times like this, for sure. Yeah, and this slide is just blank for me to tell you that I want to tell you to stay soft, stay strong, and I'll see you next time. Till we meet again, Art. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our next letter. Thank you. Additionally, here's some resources that are much better at talking about this stuff than I am. So yeah, learn more about a couple of these things in a few minutes. Check them out, or check out a playlist I'm going to attach to this. Here's Mashable on Doomscrolling. Here's Meditation for Beginners. Here's Vox by Design talking about how phones are designed to be addicting. And here's Vox explaining Putin's war on Ukraine, explained real quick, and it's a nice summary there. So you don't have to feel like you have to keep scrolling to catch up on what's happening. All right, that's what I got, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Ta-ta for now.